I used to think Karen was a joke. Have you ever met Karen? No, I'm not talking about your average everyday busybody or pain in the neck. I'm talking, of course, about the origin of the name. Most people these days agree on one thing about her. Whoever she is, she's been there since the very beginning when the first White Castle food stand was founded in 1921. Legend goes that on that day, one Karen Mayer began an obsession. It was the first hamburger she'd ever tasted, and for the rest of her life, until she grew up of old age, she dedicated herself to eating fast food every single day. She became a sensation, beloved by owners, customers, and workers alike. So why, you may ask, do we say the name Karen with such disdain and sometimes fear in the fast food industry? And what does a woman dead long before 2025 have to do with any of this? You see, they say obsession is unhealthy for you. We've always been warned about that. And Karen, it seems, if you ask the right person, has taken her obsession to the grave. Unfortunately, it's a different world these days. Fast food has become commercialized, the meat more processed, and the customers more vicious. Unfortunately, I know firsthand how this has affected the entity we in the industry call Karen. I wasn't like most people. Instead of working through high school and college, I got my first job at 24 years old. I was green-nosed and ready to join the workforce after having studied my parents' money and my time away at the local college. But as we all know, the job market remains awful, and I soon found myself as the latest cashier at my local Burger King. I'll skip the boring details of the job. If you've worked any form of food service, you know how it goes. Long hours, little room for error, and plenty of public confrontation. I considered myself lucky to have a great manager and team to make it more tolerable. Several years later, I had worked my way all the way to general manager. My family, girlfriend, and my teammates couldn't have been prouder. And stepping into my office that first night was a feeling of pride in and of itself. Then I read the management binder. I already hear where your mind goes. A bizarre list of rules, right? I wish it had been that easy. A list might have been helpful to prepare me for what I was about to endure that night. Instead, hidden among the many prep lists, scheduling, and the like, I found a warning. If you see this woman, call 855-827-3727. She looked wholly unremarkable on the surface, but what did stand out was the fact she looked like your stereotypical Karen, down to the haircut and attitude on her face. I couldn't tell at the time if it was a joke or not, but simply laughed it off, especially when I read the bottom. Do not engage. This is the part of the scary movie where, if you have sense, you run. But I'd dealt with my fair share of difficult customers, and the last thing I cared about was some temperamental old woman. After all, that first day I had 2 call-outs, and my welcome party had ended up being working the graveyard shift alone. Now, if you've ever worked at Burger King, you'd know that we close our lobby at 10 p.m. So the saving grace was that I didn't have to worry about anything but the drive-thru and cleaning until my morning crew arrived at 5:30 a.m. It was horrible, but being paid the big bucks now, I swallowed my pride. I'd been cleaning up the broiler at nearly 3 in the morning when I heard an impossible sound from the lobby, a loud, angry cough. Startled, I decided to check to make sure my district manager was not looking for a surprise visit. But upon entering the cashier stand, I saw her, the woman from the photo. She stood 5'4" and presented herself as an older woman. Her clothes were dated, like from a completely different time period, and something about her put me immediately at unease. She didn't waste time with pleasantries or an explanation of why she was there. She only spoke that all too familiar phrase, "I want to speak to your manager." By now, I was convinced this was someone's idea of an elaborate joke. After all, I'd locked the doors myself that night, and I knew only the DM, my new assistant manager, and myself had the keys. Without a viable entry without one, the situation was impossible. But I've never been a playful person, nor was I falling for something so weird for that matter. I am the manager. She seemed to stare at me for a long time as if I had broken her. She didn't move, didn't speak. Hell, I don't think I even saw her blink. She just stared. "Ma'am, our lobby closes at 10. If you'd like to continue this conversation, you'll need to go through the drive-thru." When I tell you I still see the smile she gave me in my nightmares to this day, I mean it. 3 of her teeth were missing, and her tongue appeared a charcoal black. But what was worse was the blood that trickled just faintly down her chin, only a minute before the lights above her began to flicker. I nearly jumped a foot in the air as we plunged into darkness. It only lasted a second, but when they came back on, the woman was gone. On the counter instead sat a moldy, wet takeout bag that smelled so foul I nearly gagged. I didn't want to look inside, but the more pungent it became, the more a feeling of dread crossed over me, and and compelled me to it. What I saw inside made me call the number on the photo and lock myself inside the office the rest of that night. Not that it helped very much, as the next few hours could be described as hell on earth for me. I could hear her cackles all around me, a sound so scratchy and wicked beyond anything I'd heard before. And when I didn't hear her, I saw her, smiling at me through the office's singular window, beckoning me to come. No matter what she did, though, the same phrase repeated over and over in my head. I want to speak to the manager. By the time whoever I called arrived, I was in the corner of the room, a babbling, incoherent mess of a man, and Karen was long gone. Two men in nondescript black suits and carrying a skeleton key opened the office door and got me to my feet. And to this day, I still don't know who they were. They didn't offer me their names either, never even said who they worked for. Instead, they had only one question for me. Did you speak to her? It was all I could do in that moment to tremble and point to the bag still sitting atop the counter. The older of the two men upturned his nose, but slowly approached it and, with a gloved hand, opened it up. I expected shock, disgust, anything but what came next. The man simply frowned, turning his blue eyes to his younger partner. God damn it, it's Reggie. Reggie, as I'd learned in the hours that followed, was the last general manager on staff. I'd been told he'd been let go after he'd left the store overnight and refused to return any calls from his store or the district. They'd all assumed he'd ghosted, left for greener pastures, until the bag containing his severed head was left on my counter that night. The two men sat me down and explained I was being let go for my own safety. And frankly, if the present I'd been left was any indication, I'm glad to hear it. It came with a beautiful severance package and all expenses paid therapy, which is more than most people can say they've walked away from a fast food job with. While having my exit interview, I took a chance on asking my district manager for answers. That's how I was told the story of Karen Mayer, a woman long dead who to this day pays a visit to her favorite food chains. We don't know what she wants. We just know if you talk to her, even acknowledge her. He paused, taking a drag of his cigarette, as we stood out by the trash cans that morning. Bad shit happens. You're a lucky bastard, Michael. Not many people live through it. That's why we've made a point of pointing out any potential Karen we see. It keeps the casualties low. Before I could ask anything else, he shook my hand, handed me my last check, and sent me on my way. It's been a few decades now, but every time I see those Karen videos, I can't help but feel a cold chill run up my spine. I never did set foot in another fast food joint again. My nerves completely shot and my fear too great. Until last night. The things you do for your kids, right? Sean had been crying for a Happy Meal all month, and it was his birthday. How could I say no? I entered that McDonald's and told myself it was so long ago nothing bad could possibly happen. I'd been halfway through my Big Mac when I heard a familiar voice. I want to speak to the manager. My blood ran cold as I turned to the cashier stand, where some poor soul stood, a blank face staring back at the voice's owner. But the voice hadn't been talking to them at all. No. Instead, Karen stood there with her bright, bloody smile. My son probably thinks I'm insane, having picked him up right there and then, fleeing for both of our lives. But as far as I'm concerned, as long as there is a fast food chain out there, I'll probably never be safe. So if there's one piece of advice I'd give to all you managers out there, read your manual. Keep your eyes peeled, and whatever you do, if someone who looks like a Karen asks for the manager, do not engage.